Africa serves as a mission, given that it's hosting the G20 presidency, and there are lots of engagements happening on different fronts, particularly the role of the media, and of course, what that landscape has looked like 31 years into our own democracy, and what the future of it is going to look like, given the shifting geopolitical landscape, information integrity, and the use of AI at large. As you all know, we recently observed the World Press Freedom Day as well, and this is a chance to really commemorate, the use of AI, but also the bravery of journalists and, the impact of press freedom as well. So it's nice to see a lot of you back. I know we were there for those commemorations. That also follows, South Africa having observed Freedom Day on the 27th of April. And we obviously know the important role that freedom and press freedom play here in South Africa. I'm Lisa Olsen. Mine is to steer the ship today. Really exciting engagements, and then obviously there's going to be another discussion just after the break. We've got a few representatives who will be sharing some important insights. So that will be looking at the way forward for South Africa in relation to the G20 presidency. But it's also important to understand where you come from. So the topic today looks at from Brazil to South Africa, putting media issues on the map, given the framework of the G20 as well. And so without further ado, I'm going to welcome French Ambassador David Martineau, French Ambassador to South Africa, Lesotho, and Malawi, with some opening remarks. Let's give him a welcome.
Merci beaucoup. Distinguished guests, dear colleagues, dear ambassadors, different. It's obviously a pleasure and honor to welcome you to the residence of France for what I believe is a vital conversation in the context of the G20 this year, hosted in South Africa. As you rightly said, May 3rd, Press Freedom Day, we attribute on our social media to Henry Tumalo, one of the first Black investigative journalists in South Africa, also known as Mr. Drum. He reported on the harsh living conditions of Black laborers and Black comrades. In 1957, he was murdered in unclear circumstances while investigating an abortion racket. I could also mention Percy Kobosa, Swela Kesisulu, Ruth First, Matt Makasa, who was close to photographer, Ernest Cole, Amin Atalwaya, etc. Names, the list is very long. I can only, by the way, encourage you to watch this fantastic movie, Ernest Cole, Lost and Found, by French director Holbeck, who was presented last year at the Cannes Festival, and which says so much about the apartheid regime, the work of Ernest Cole. All these names exposed what the apartheid regime tried so desperately to hide. They were intimidated, jailed, killed, or sometimes even forced to suicide. The apartheid regime, like many other authoritarian or totalitarian regimes, wanted to avoid at all costs the truth coming out. Thanks to the determination and sacrifice, and that of many other South African activists, those days are gone in South Africa. However, in other countries, this situation persists. Personally, I would not dare work as a journalist in Russia, for example, and share the fate of Anna Politkovskaya and so many of her colleagues from Russia and from Ukraine, killed in Moscow. It's not only about Russia, of course, but Russia really is a case study which shows you that authoritarian regimes not only suppress press freedom at home, they also master propaganda techniques abroad. And they are good at it. I urge you to think about the way the Kremlin uses a combination of traditional media, like the Russia Today, Sputnik, and and also troll farmers, as well as intelligence services to exploit the chaos of social media. Democratic states and the free press really struggle in face of such insane stream of disinformation. On the other side of the world, so-called advocates of the freedom of speech fight vehemently against any attempt to regulate social media, hate speech, and online disinformation. So for those who are not Europeans, I just want to make it clear. In Europe, there are rules not to prevent freedom of speech, just to make sure that the space of information, in the space of information, and the online, the rules that do apply are exactly the same as those who apply in reality. Same, no change. And so in this context, the media sector faces a quadruple crisis. One, there is obviously the overwhelming dominance of powerful digital platforms. Two, related to this, there are several financial pressures and the competition of new media that are driving newsrooms to downsize or even to close entirely. Three, then there is the unrelenting rise of disinformation and manipulation of information by states or parastatal entities. And finally, there is the threat to the safety of journalists who increasingly face harassment, intimidation, violence, and sometimes risk their lives to work and provide reliable information to the public. Here let me digress briefly to pay tribute to the French journalists who died over the last years while covering the conflict. I have in mind Arnaud Soldat, Frédéric Leclerc, who perished in Ukraine, Camille Lepage, who died in Central African Republic, Ghislaine Dupont, Claude Vernon in Mali, Stéphane Villeneuve in Iraq, for example. Many others obviously have been injured or abducted for ransom, notably in Mali, notably in Afghanistan. France is very much involved in tackling the root causes that threaten information integrity. As I was mentioning earlier, within the European Union, we are strong advocates for a stricter answer to online disinformation. Also insists that the European Digital Services Act, so the DSA, should be implemented more strictly to better fight disinformation. France also supports the Partnership for Information and Democracy, represented here by Ms. Katharina Söger. And I can only think about my friend Christophe Leloir, who is at that time the chairman and president of Reporters Sans Frontières, who passed away last year, and who has been absolutely instrumental in creating the Partnership for Information and Democracy, and generally speaking, and I'm happy to say that, to protect journalists around the world. I remember the time when together we made sure that we would evacuate as many journalists could from Afghanistan as instead of Iraq was absolutely key in that process. So the partnership aims to promote national and international legal frameworks encouraging freedom of speech and the right to information. And yes, we have consistently placed media freedom and the integrity of information at the core of our democratic commitments, both at home and on the global stage. We must protect citizens' ability to make informed choices. And we believe that any informed international forum is the right place to support free press freedom, including the G20. That is why we are especially pleased to support and host this event today, co-organized with our South African partners at Sanef, Media Monitoring Africa, as well as the Forum on Information and Democracy. Our aim is to support the voices of those who work every day to protect the integrity of information. And this initiative obviously connects the dots between Brazil's G20 presidency and South Africa's presidency, and serves to anchor the importance of media in multilateral dialogue. I would like to thank all our speakers, participants and guests from Brazil, from South Africa, and beyond for coming together to explore how we can improve media reliability, promote international cooperation, and raise the visibility of media issues on the G20 agenda. As a representative of a government, I testify that it's not always easy to work with journalists. Yes. Having been a press secretary to a president, I remember that sometimes press briefings would fight in a positive way. That's I don't know. Testimony that I can't live without you guys, but I'm very the journalist, so let's so let us make today a starting point for a deeper collaboration. Thank you very much, and I look forward to our conversations ahead. Yes.
Martin, thank you for that. It's important to note that with the erosion of public trust and your points about misinformation and disinformation, absolutely those who lost their lives in the line of duty, protecting media freedom and press freedom at large really becomes pertinent. And so this is going to obviously top the agenda with G20 and some of the other initiatives as we move forward. Thank you again for those opening remarks. As we continue with the program, I now want to welcome Chomano Makani, who is from Sanef. He is the Deputy Chair. He's also going to be providing some opening remarks. Good morning, Chomano. Welcome.
I'm not sure if I should start by saying Sambonani, and there will be many who will understand what I'm saying. Sambonani. Imachelo. Merci beaucoup. Ambassador Atino, Your Excellencies, thank you so much. Friends and colleagues. Mine is a brief one from a South African National Editors Forum's point of view. We believe that media freedom is equals freedom. Something that we need to guard with our lives. We have had, as we continue to experience, a number of challenges here in South Africa and obviously across the region. Some of these challenges include amongst media sustainability. We've been talking and trying to find solutions, but there's just one particular point which I want to get out of the way, given the limitations with time. The proposal that we are putting forward from an M20 point of view, and this is the first issue paper on media and digital, digital policy with specific reference to information integrity. I'm going to take you through just it's actually the summary of the executive summary, if that makes sense. Media and digital policy matters are recognized within the G20, providing an opportunity in 2025 to flag the core value added coming from news media as a crucial contribution to what is increasingly called information integrity. This matter impacts on journalism's contribution to information as a public good. Media engagement on the G20's interest in information integrity can make a difference as to whether journalism's strength and standing can make gains, or if current current troubling media trends stay as they are, or even go more horribly wrong. We are of the belief that the G20 should recognize that the crisis of information integrity is growing at a time when the news media is shrinking. We have seen what is happening here in the country. There are many examples to list. This imbalance threatens the interest of the 2025 G20 priorities of combating climate change, inequities, and dangerous debt levels, as well as addressing issues of disaster resilience, critical minerals. The current trends foresee an increase in low quality and false information, with increasing AI hallucinations and deceptive deepfake being produced and circulated, then reintegrated as training data for further AI development in a further downward spiral for quality information. Current trends also point to a continued global decline in press freedom on the one hand, the business viability of news media institutions on the other. A perfect storm is intensifying, and without stronger efforts to support information integrity, humanity will flounder as a new challenges and opportunities appear. We have a list of issues that we are working on, and we want to put this forward. And we believe this is just the first of its kind, as there will be a few others that we will be putting forward and communicate them with most of you that are in the room. So allow me to sit. We have limited time, but those are the issues that from a South African national editor's point of view, we would like to put forward. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Shamano. The interventions from the media is obviously going to be aligned to the G20's theme this year, including solidarity, where information integrity is aligned to the UN global principles. There's also equality, universal access to public interest news, and then sustainability, the investment and investing in and also support for credible media at large. And so as we continue with this now, I would also like to welcome those who are joining us online. If you also need the Wi-Fi, I think we can arrange that as well someday. Cecilia, can we get that if that's possible? Okay, I think some people are losing signal, that's why, yes. But the bathrooms are also just through this door over here. So the ladies is furthest on the left, down the hallway, and the men's or the gents are, it's the door just before the ladies. You turn left and you see the men's bathroom there. On that note, William Britt, you're up next, Director for Media Monitoring Africa. It's going to be sharing some opening remarks. Welcome. Thank you. Please welcome him.
Good morning. And I think first we just want to express a sincere thanks to the French ambassador and his team, in particular Cecilia and Catalina, for all the support and assistance you've given in making sure that this event can take place. We know that this is one of the most prized and booked out venues apparently on the embassy areas, and we can see why as we walk through these gardens. So thank you very much for hosting us. Thank you, Catalina, for your support as well for this. So we're here effectively for
an M20, which is the media 20, linked to the G20, obviously, right, which is a critical issue. And I think one of the things that we're all going to emphasize is the importance of information integrity. We know that the need for this couldn't be greater than this. Well, it's probably greater than it. Precisely because we're facing extinction level events on a range of areas and sectors. One, we're facing recognized disinformation on a level and scale that's been propounded and used to by some of the most powerful people in the world, including some of that country. AI poses its own challenges and significant threats to not just our sector, but to our societies, to our stability, to how we understand, receive, impart information. Unless we direct it with a rights-based lens, or at least a respect for common humanity, we're going to see very similar kind of patterns as we've seen with social media. And another massive crisis facing us is sustainability. We've got fewer and fewer journalists, and the need for them is increasingly great, and yet many of them are struggling just to survive. We're also living in a time where inequality is increasing, and there's declining trust in public institutions and democratic institutions. And so more than ever, we have to actually pull together to work towards our common humanity, which is why, with our partners, we formed the M20 precisely because we want to start to build a meaningful collaboration that goes beyond not just this particular G20 gathering, but for the years beyond. And I'm looking and speaking directly to our European friends here. Next year, we know this is headed towards the land of the orange-haired lunatic. The year after that, it goes back to somewhere where there's hopefully a little bit more stability and sensibility. And we really hope that as we do that, and given the critical importance of media and media freedom, that we've lit this torch, we've taken this torch, and we're going to continue to drive it beyond this year. We'll try whatever we can to hopefully ensure that it keeps burning in America, not with America, like we said, to burn anyway. But that certainly it continues to burn brightly when the G20 returns to the EU. So in terms of practical things that we're doing to instill information integrity, we're building systems like Reform 1, and we're leading a consultation on Resolution 630. We've got some pamphlets on that. And that's relevant to this discussion because it's the African Commission on Human and People's Rights resolution on information integrity. There's a desire to drive African guidelines and African approach to understanding not just information integrity, but access to data, as well as public interest content. We also need to work fundamentally to make sure that our journalists are safe online. We also need to work fundamentally to address the inequalities that exist and are deepening online, particularly in relation to marginalized groups and women being systematically attacked. So we're in this for not just the short form, but for the long form. For those that are interested in supporting these initiatives, we've got about 12 or 14 different events that are scheduled before September, where there's going to be a massive culmination and a significant conference and event that's going to piggyback on a really cool event that Martin will tell you about if you give him a chance. It's really cool looking at sustainability. And then we will be hosting a summit just after that, specifically focused on M20 issues that will hopefully bring together some of those issue papers that Samana has spoken about. So there's coordination, there's a lot of brilliant partners. We could always do with more. So if you're keen on supporting these events, we gather here. Please speak to myself or one of my lovely colleagues or Isaac Minoa, and we'll put you in touch. But we look forward to some really brilliant discussions, and thank you once again.
Thank you.
Thanks, William. There's an exciting calendar indeed. As politics towards September and of course November. I'm going to round off these opening remarks with an opening remark from Katerina Tsugo, Forum of Information and Democracy Representative. Katerina, good morning and welcome. Let's give a warm round of applause.
Good morning, everyone. It is a great pleasure for the Forum on Information to be here and to co-host this event from Brazil to South Africa, media issues and information integrity in the framework of G20. First of all, I really would like to thank our partners in South Africa, Sanef, Media Monitoring Africa, and GIBS, with whom we've been working for a long time to put together this event and to put this important topic on the agenda. But I also would like to express my gratitude to the French Embassy to Ambassador Martin for hosting this event today. Actually, France is at the original of a lot of the work that we've been doing to be the International Partnership for Information and Democracy was founded in 2019 under the leadership of President Macron in several other countries. When Reporters Without Borders put together an international commission on media freedom and information integrity in 2018 to elaborate the global declarations, global values on the information space, we didn't know that 7 years later, these topics will be as relevant and as urgent as again, or even more. The main idea of that commission was to encourage governments and civil society to set democratic rules for the global information space and make sure this is a common good and one governed by democratic principles and not based by private gains. Today, this intergovernmental agreement and civil society bring together a coalition of 55 states worldwide, including a lot of EU states, but also South Africa. And it's a space to work together and promote democratic principles and values. Yet, and quite unfortunately, this space remains governed by the interests of some big tech leaders, something we've been seeing even more over the last months. It is governed by commercial data extraction and engagement-driven business model. It does not have democracy, public values, or society at its core interest. This has led, as many of the speakers have said before, to dis and misinformation impacting elections, polarizations, and distrust in facts and media. Actually, a lot of the principles we said back then in 2018 are of even greater importance today. So first of all, that declaration calls not for just the right to freedom of expression, but for the protection of the right to reliable information, really putting an emphasis on it's not just about having access to information, but having access to information that's free, independent, fact-checked, crossing various sources, and exist in a pluralistic media landscape. It also calls for the protection of journalists against threats and violence and online harassment, something that is even more of greater importance now. It also calls for transparency and accountability of the online platforms, which should guide how they develop their algorithmic curation and moderation, something which is far from being achieved. And finally, and something that is really not the case today, it calls for the political, ideological, and religious neutrality of these platforms. They should not be abused for political or ideological goals, but be at the service of all of humanity. The past has shown that only when governments work together and provide an inclusive space to involve civil society and academia, we can elaborate rights-respecting regulation that sets boundaries for big tech. The European Union, which is presented by several member states today, and SL, has taken a leadership role with the DSA and the DMA, and has to show this leadership also in implementation. The UK and Canada followed suit. Initiatives are underway in Brazil and South Africa. Yet, we've seen that as they've been met with a strong lobbying against these regulations with the ambition to weaken the regulations or even get rid of them totally. Last year, Brazil took a major step in the right direction as it put information integrity as a key priority of the G20 presidency. We're really pleased to hear from you today. At the forum, we had the chance to contribute actively to the different side events hosted during last year, culminating the G20 summit in Rio, where we participated in the launch of the Global Initiative for Information Integrity and Climate Change, an important initiative to bring countries, civil society, and academia together to promote information integrity and access to reliable information on climate issues. We support this initiative by having launched a dedicated work stream of the Partnership for Information and Democracy on the topic of climate change and other environmental issues, really with the ambition to work with civil society and government to develop very concrete solutions. The statement of last year's G20 working group on digital economy is an example that we can extend the number of supporters for information integrity and media freedom around the world and make it a key priority of the G20. So that's why at the forum we are supporting the efforts today to bring the topic of media and information integrity to the attention of all stakeholders, and hope that in the long run we can set up an official engagement on media, so an G20. I really look forward to today's conversations, which will identify strategy and set the way forward to put democratic rules, media freedom, information integrity on the agenda, because only through access to reliable information and an independent public interest media can we achieve the goals of the South African presidency, namely solidarity, equality, and sustainability. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Katarina, for also highlighting the need for the long-term viability of news organizations, funding models, financial health of news as well, but even just the way big platforms contribute or hinder the role of media to provide, quality journalism, but also service mandates with regard to public interest and mandate, public interest as well. So thank you for speaking to that. The South African government also recognized the significant strides that the G20 Brazilian presidency made in enhancing the G20 site as a site for democratic global engagement. And so as South Africa takes on that baton, I'm just going to now welcome, the Brazilian ambassador to South Africa, Ambassador Benedicto Fonseca Filho, to highlight some of the insights that obviously emerged from the Brazilian G20 presidency, plus speaking to our team from Brazil to South Africa, putting media issues on the map in the framework of the G20. So on that note, let's have
Thank you. I want to start together. Thank start by also thanking my friend, for hosting the event and all the South African partners. I should say from the start that we can subscribe to all that has been said for the moment. I will start maybe by framing these discussions in Brazil, and then which of course is our work in G20 other foreign is a projection of what is taking place in Brazil. Well, we believe that information integrity is of vital importance, not only to maintain trust in public institutions and in democratic and governance processes, but also to assist in the mitigation of political, social, and economic instability and the spread of radicalization and violent extremism. We have seen in Brazil, for example, that these issues were present right after the election of President Lula, because a number of people got information, fake news, disinformation to the extent that led to an uprising. And we had, as you may know, attacks against the three powers of Brazil, and these had developments. Justice, of course, has engaged, and there were judicial actions against those people. But that shows how fake news and disinformation can affect very completely even the democratic and political process. We also believe that addressing the challenges associated with the preservation of information integrity is essential to safeguard the freedom of expression, and at the same time, I think those are two faces of the same issue: freedom of expression, but also the access of reliable information that has been said. In that spirit, Brazil has championed the inclusion of the discussion on information integrity in the agenda of several multilateral settings we participate, maybe G20, of course, but also BRICS, at the United Nations General Assembly, UNESCO, So we have had initiatives in all those forums. And also, this is always part of bilateral meetings that are held at various levels, including presidential level. I will also mention what is being done in Brazil, the development that are taking place from the perspective of government and also from the perspective of the legislative process. The present government of President Lula has established from the beginning secretariat for digital policies directly linked to the president's office to advance information integrity and support the sustainability of independent and pluralistic journalism. It must be said is the work of this unit, the Secretariat for Digital Policies, has 5 priorities to support public trust in journalism, the economic viability of media organizations, safety and protection of journalists, of media professionals, equitable access to journalism, and the development of an open and balanced information environment. And within these 5 priorities, the 3 key actions we work are directly being pursued by this Secretariat for Digital Policies. First of all, the promotion of fair remuneration for journalists by the digital platforms. We are exploring innovative legal mechanisms to strengthen journalist sustainability in the digital age. Among the initiatives under discussion are proposals to ensure that digital platforms contribute fairly to the protection of press ecosystem, including through remuneration for content use and taxation of offshore digital services that are accessed in Brazil. In that context, very interesting development that took place in our parliament was the discussion, the proposal of a fake news draft bill. That was a very controversial topic within Parliament, and it evolved into a draft bill on remuneration of copyright in general. Although this piece of legislation has stalled in Congress, it is not being considered as a priority now. The issue of the remuneration of journalistic content is being addressed in another front. The discussion on a draft bill on artificial intelligence. So within this discussion, also the question of payments to journalists and content by digital platforms. And this bill is supported, of course, by a broad coalition, including government bodies, civil society, and academic institutions. And aims to align artificial intelligence development with ethical and human rights-based principles. It introduces transparency requirements in regard to the use of databases by digital platforms and also the payment for the use of materials protected by copyright. And the main objective of this draft bill is to ensure, of course, that the development and implementation use of artificial intelligence systems will be done in a responsible way. Bear in mind that, as I said, ethics and safety, and with a particular focus on protection of human rights, of the democratic regime, and take into account scientific and technological development. And the second work stream concerns the creation of an incubator for independent and community-based media. And the intention behind this is to a pioneer program was launched to support the emerging independent media voices, especially from underrepresented communities. So there is a concern to bring the voices that are not frequently heard, also to in the public debates. And this because we have an understanding that innovation that should be brought to governments should include actions that will provide knowledge, infrastructure, and business model development to be, especially in what we call the micro, small, and medium enterprises. So the SMEs, but also the very micro institutions, especially those owned by minorities and disadvantaged people, operate outside traditional sectors. Strengthening their ability to navigate challenges posed by digital convergence, platform concentration, and the rise of artificial intelligence. And the third work stream focuses on optimizing the federal government's own resources to support public journalism. So we, in that sense, it is being reviewed with the regulatory framework for federal public advertising in order to make it more inclusive, transparent, and aligned with the values of information integrity. One key objective is to facilitate the registration of media outlets and content producers, including digital influencers and podcast creators, in a way that micro, small, medium-sized government initiatives can be more readily considered in government media plans and the use of federal funds for government media initiatives. And last year, the Secretary for Social Communication, which is another institution directly linked to the President's office, in coordination with the Secretary for Digital Policies, issued new regulations establishing information integrity related criteria for the registration of advertising vehicles and agents. And these include requirements for editorial transparency in the case of journalism outlets, and the adoption of mandatory terms of use that prohibit hate speech and other unlawful practices. And taking them into consideration this background, I'd like to highlight two initiatives undertaken by the presidency directly related to media issues. In April, May last year, as it has been already highlighted, we hosted a side event to the Digital Economy Working Group. This side event was titled Information Integrity and Trust in the Digital Environment that was held in São Paulo. And of course, take into account the work that is being done in the United Nations. And we should remember that this meeting preceded the adoption of the Global Digital Compact that's on the occasion of the General Assembly last year. And this initiative was the first time that the topic of information integrity, especially related on this, was included in this group, and it was reflected, the work of the working group was reflected in the ministerial declaration that was adopted by consensus, and it even gave way to the leaders, the leaders summit final document, through which the member states committed to promote information integrity through different actions, including investments in media literacy, the promotion of a robust and sustainable digital ecosystem, to ensure the provision of independent, factual, and evidence-based information, and also the ethical use of artificial intelligence in information ecosystem. We understand that this achievement we could reach, of course, with the in consensus with G20 members is a task that will be much more hard for the present South African presidency, not as a lack of agency, but because of course the geopolitical environment has changed dramatically. For example, the first foreign ministers meeting and also the first finance ministers meeting within the South African presidency ended up not as a consensus documents, but rather a chair summary. So that reflects the difficulty to achieve consensus on those topics. So we anticipate a very hard time for the South African presidency, who the initiatives of which we fully adhere to, and we are very glad that this discussion will conclude under the South African presidency. But as I said, maybe the results, the outcome will not be as promising as we were able to achieve. And the second, also the initiative that was, you can see, was directly related to the efforts undertaken by the Brazilian G20 presidency, refers to the launching November last year in partnership with the United Nations and UNESCO of the Global Initiative for Information Integrity Climate Change, which has already been mentioned. And this initiative was established as a dedicated multilateral collaboration among states and international organizations to support research and action aimed at promoting information integrity in climate-related issues, which are recognized as a critical area of work, and that is present also in the various foreign beyond G20. So we understand this initiative will contribute not only to the discussions in the session, but for the overall knowledge and efforts toward the climate action. And to broaden the scope and depth of knowledge on climate information and its impact, it aims to, this initiative aims to collect evidence around the world to inform and strengthen rapid response support mechanisms and communication efforts. As you all know, actions to fight climate change are significantly undermined by denialism, and disinformation. And we understand that no country can overcome this challenge in isolation. In that context, this global initiative for information integrity on climate change aims to bring together states, international organizations, research networks in a coordinated effort to combat disinformation to guide climate action in the lead up to COP30 that will host in November this year in the capital of Amazon. And countries participating in this initiative, including Brazil and France, will contribute to a fund managed by UNESCO with an initial target of raising between $10 and $50 million over the period 2025 and 2027. And these resources will be allocated as grants to non-governmental organizations engaged in research on climate information integrity, development of communication strategies, and implementation of public awareness campaigns. And as I have said, this initiative is aligned with the commitments outlined in the Global Digital Compact adopted next year in September. And moreover, it encourages the United Nations entities in collaboration with government and other stakeholders to assess the impact of this information on the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. And finally, I should mention also that in the context of the Brazilian UNFCCC COP30 to be held in Belém, as I have said in behalf of the Amazon in November. Brazil will organize side events on the margins of important international meetings on related subjects to the COP30, focused on the integrity of information. For example, on the side of the upcoming sessions of SBR and such that support the work of COP30 and the IGF, which, by the way, myself and Ambassador Martino have been engaged for a number of years because we have been working as our Brazilian friends as negotiators within what we called at the time the internet governance. And I see this expression today has been, in a way, has evolved to digital governance beyond the internet. Although at the time also addressed all these issues, but now I think the digital reflects more of the scope and ambition of those global discussions. So I would just repeat that what we have been doing internally, the discussions we have had internally, in a way, they reflect in our international actions, and they also reflect, I would say, the contradictions and the opposing powers that create this debate, which of course we should not ignore that a number of parties are not interested in this discussion, and they try, of course, to delay the discussions. And one thing that is very concerning to me is that many people, as much as we can work towards providing integrity information, many people and many parties are not interested in integrity information. Even in Brazil and elsewhere, we see people say, no, we cannot rely on the media. We must seek our own information in our own sources. Even we saw somebody speaking of alternative reality. So I think this effort is valuable, is necessary, but I think it would also be important to focus on how to deal with those important part of society that are not interested in anything we do. So maybe we should also talk about how to deal with these people inside the discussion, because otherwise, in some cases, they represent a very large proportion of the population. Unfortunately, we have seen in Brazil that almost 50% of the population are very low, was ready to vote on the basis largely of fake news and information. So this is a very concerning aspect that I think should also be part of the discussion. So I thank you very much for your attention.
We are reminded about misperceptions and perhaps what the perceptions are, because the cloud memory also serves us well. What we choose to remember and what we choose to forget, especially where politics is being guided or misguided by emotions. But we're seeing this with multilateralism, some countries moving towards protectionism and nationalism as well. So this is where the role of media and press freedom becomes important, now so more than ever. So thank you for speaking to some of those strategies. The baton has now been handed over. Just quickly, you highlighted, the importance of restoring public trust and upholding information integrity. That important fund resources are always important, perhaps for strategy and some of the other affiliated issues. And then, of course, the role of media given, the digital transformation that's also much needed given inequalities and inequities at large. So that's going to form part of the discussion that we're going to be having in just a moment. So looking forward to all of the valuable insights by student panelists as well as all of you who are here. So we'll have that in about 15 minutes. On that note, I'm going to allow you to stretch your legs Use the bathroom, please make your way to the outside terrace, we'll be back in 15 minutes. Thank you. Hi.
Yeah.
All right, welcome back, everyone. I hope the refresher was to your satisfaction. We're going to continue now with the panel discussion for the next hour or so, and then we're going to welcome your feedback, some of the questions and answers that remain lingering as we continue. I think just before we delve into that and I introduce our panelists, I just want to welcome Cecilia from the French Embassy. She's got a quick announcement, and then we'll delve in further. Cecilia, welcome. It's over to you.
Thank you so much, Liesel. This is just a quick commercial break. We have a wonderful venue in Johannesburg called the Dibu Cafe, and it's in Newtown, and it's attached to our French Institute. And we'd like to encourage you to come and chat to us about using it for further engagements. It's a beautiful space, it's a special space, and obviously will attract a different kind of crowd. And so please do come and chat to me about the use of that venue going forward. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Cecilia. All right, so on that note, let's get into the discussion at hand. I'm just going to welcome our panelists. If you can please make your way to the front as I call your name out, and then we'll continue further. Gawa is from the African Editors Forum, is also the Treasurer General of Sanef. Let's give him a warm round. Mr. Namumba Lipotso, Program Manager at Media Monitoring Africa. Paula Miraglia, founder of Momentum Journalism and Tech Task Force. She's from Brazil. And then we've got Moiponi Malifane, who's going to represent Sanef today. Moiponi, good morning. Sure, please be careful. It's a tight, we're really close together. It's okay, it's the units you need. All right, thank you to our esteemed panelists for being part of this discussion today. It was exciting to hear from the Brazilian ambassador to South Africa, who set the scene, obviously, in relation to what transpired in Brazil. And now that the baton has been handed over, what South Africa's role is going to look like, we're obviously looking at the role of media at large as well. And so I'm going to perhaps start this conversation with you, Spoo. Context is always important. So perhaps you could speak to the lay of the land, but what is this media landscape looking like? And if we're going to speak about those key policy issues and the recommendations that you're going to be taking forward, succinctly highlight that for us, please.
Thank you very much, Liesel. Good morning. I'm always happy to go first. I can go through the points and leave nothing on the floor. That's how we kind the ladies. I think, Liesel, when you're talking about, you took linked to your first question, the state of journalism and media. I think we can just look at the recent World Press Freedom Index, which actually highlighted an unprecedented scenario where, for the first time, you had almost half of all the countries, out of 180 of those countries, scoring poorly. And now they are saying that the global state of press freedom across the world can best be described as a difficult situation. So I think that kind of encapsulates where we are
I mean, in South Africa, we are looking pretty young at 4, sitting at number 27. And I think for the first time we've surpassed Namibia. That's good for us, but we are not an island. We exist within a region, we exist within a continent, and within a global environment. So it is quite concerning where we are. But I don't think it's surprising when you look at the rise of disinformation and misinformation. So I think as we gather here today to talk particularly about the issue of information integrity, it's actually quite important to, I would say, even global stability and peace. You know, when you are talking about information integrity at a time where, I mean, in South Africa, just 49 of our fellow South Africans being accepted as refugees in the United States, and you have the powerful X accounts of 2 men are arguably the most powerful in the world, who have a collective following of 323 million followers. That being President Trump and Elon Musk, perpetuating, I'll be honest, lies about South Africa. You know, so we are in a dangerous territory, and I think the position paper or the issue paper that William and Chamano referenced, that is our first paper, which will be published in the next few days as we are building up towards the G20, highlights that issue, particularly that of the declining media space, which is countered by the rise in disinformation and misinformation, and saying that the G20 countries there's a theme for this year that we know, but issues of growing public debt, climate change, and all other topics that normally dominate these discussions, those interests of those countries are a threat, as it were. Because if you have a media, independent media, that is on a decline, while the individual voices of even your influencers are finding better expression, that tells you that there needs to be a better reaction. It's not just for us as the media and civil society and like-minded people to promote independent and pluralistic media. It's also in the interest of countries and also those who support functional democracy around the world. So I think that that's why with this M20, with this launch today, we thank the French Embassy for hosting us. With this launch today, we'll be able to get closer and try and influence and make sure that the issue of information integrity finds expression within the upcoming G20. I mean, the president, the ambassador, sorry for taking your time, the ambassador spoke about what they are picking up in Brazil, what they're seeing. I'm sure the people relying on social media and the rise of influencers. Yes, there is also research that says, I think we were in Pulawe in Sao Paulo, when our friends from IFPIM were sharing some of the research, which shows that most young people, I think those under 30, they get their information from influencers. So that is the future, right? What do we do as a media? Do we adapt or do we stand our ground? What is the role of all these partners in making sure that independent journalism, public interest journalism is promoted to counter such? Yes, there will be influencers. Yes, in fact, one of the things that came out was that we all know that Meta prioritize news, but most young people who are, or in fact, most people who are interviewed as part of research say that they get their news from Facebook. So that tells you that it's actually not independent media or free media that is actually spreading that information or publishing that information. So, yes, there is a need for greater collaboration. And that's why I'll talk to some of the points that we make in the issue paper. But I think just to start off, those are some of the issues. That's why it's important for us to make sure that the issues that took, I mean, information integrity was a topic during the Brazilian presidency, but in the South African context, there's more of a deep dive looking particularly into the rise of deep fakes, right? Which is a part of the threats that we're facing. But I think that issue of information integrity has to continue into this presidency, has to be highlighted and take center stage, because it is much broader than dealing just with deep fakes. I think it is.
Thank you, Stu, for speaking to the realities on the ground against the shifting domestic and global landscape. And while I want to bring into the conversation, as Stu mentioned, in Brazil, you were also part of what inspired there, but key in also highlighting some of the lessons learned and the key recommendations. What would you like to add on the back of what he's just said here as well?
So, bonjour à tous et d'abord merci à l'ambassade de France pour l'invitation. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here back in South Africa to discuss an issue that is so important to both of our countries. Thank you to our friends at Sanef, Media Monitor Africa, Forum for Information and Democracy. I also want to acknowledge our South African partner GIBS, represented here by Michael Markovitz. I would like to highlight some of the issues that I find that are extremely important when it comes to information integrity and our countries. And these issues have appeared not only in the G20 discussions, but they have been important in all the discussions concerning the regulation of media, big tech platforms, and media sustainability. I speak here as a media entrepreneur. I found 2 digital media outlets in Brazil, which are together with our media environment, Brazil suffering the crises that have been impacting media all through the world, and it has been aggravated by technology, particularly generative intelligence, artificial intelligence. I also speak as a founder of a think tank, Momentum Journalism and Tech Task Force, dedicated to explore the intersection between media and technology with a focus on the global south. So I would like to start to talk about the importance of information integrity in 3 areas. I would like to start with health, public health. I find it is relevant to talk about the Brazilian context and the South African context. In the case of Brazil, during the pandemic, the COVID pandemic killed more than 700,000 Brazilians, and disinformation played a key role. Disinformation promoted in the case of Brazil, even by the government in power during that period. I think that it was the joint efforts between journalists and scientists that was key for us to have access to data, to information that was also key to preserve, aware that safety measures, vaccines could be efficient in preventing death. I would also like to highlight that the environmental transition that we need to go through in all the world, but it can be particularly important in our countries, is also something that depends on information and reliable information. We won't be able to achieve and to conclude this transition if people don't have access to information. Finally, I think that there's another issue where I find it extremely important, which is the regulation of foreigner business in our countries. And here I'm talking about the tech platforms. Brazil has been a pioneer on this effort, as our ambassador reminded us. We tried to approve a bill last 2 years ago, and we also, and it was the nickname was fake news bill, and it was a bill that had content moderation in its text, but it had also remuneration of journalists and media organizations in its texts. What we saw in Brazil was we were able to testimony the power of the big tech lobby. Big tech platforms put a lot of effort, resources, people into preventing this bill of being voted. For me, it was a lobby with no precedent in history. Google has more than 90% of market share in Brazil when it comes to search. And they put in a search bar a phrase that said something along the lines, the bill 2630, which was the bill, is going to ruin your free internet. Was something like that. I'm not being precise with the text, but it's something that it was openly campaigning about our legislation. So the bill was not even voted. So we had a taste about many important points. First, that there is a limitation of the conversions of our interests. Second, that the lobby can be extremely powerful and can interfere in national matters. And we need to conduct our discussions and our strategies being truly aware of that. Brazil has also been pioneering, as we have now, an AI bill, general review that has been approved in the Senate, is going to be now discussed in the Congress. The bill has an important discussion around copyrights, which is a discussion that enters the media ecosystem around our content, which is costly to produce. It costs a lot to produce good quality journalism, cannot be used for free by tech platforms. We need to be remunerated by them. This is the only way to guarantee that we will still exist and be relevant. But the same things are happening in South Africa. South Africa released a report from the Competition Commission, which is extremely, a provisional report, which is extremely interesting and important to inform our discussions globally. And I can tell you that it has been an inspiration also to Brazil. Both of our countries have a civil society on digital rights that is truly informed, clever, has been promoting this debate for years now. We have also civil society that is really important in discussion of freedom of expression. I'm saying this because our solutions, our national solutions, we are also very extremely important markets when it comes to platforms. So our national debates, our national solutions, they need to be part of the global conversation. Our agendas cannot be settled. We need to be setting the agendas. We cannot be only engaged in these debates. We need to be setting these debates. And sustainability, media sustainability, is not an issue that interests only journalists or media organizations. It's an issue that is relevant to our society. And facing a new global geopolitical organization, we need to work together with countries, with organizations that are committed to democratic principles. And we need a cooperation among countries that are committed to those principles. Journalism as a pillar of democracy is not an abstraction. It's not something that we say because it's a beautiful phrase to be said. Disinformation, as our Brazilian ambassador reminded us, has very concrete impacts on the lives of people every day. In this sense, it's key that we're able to have this discussion, this debate, around a debate that involves socioeconomic development. And the G20 is a forum for us to do that. Cooperation is key. The task that we have ahead of us is huge. And it involves players that probably have the biggest private power in the history of humanity. So if we have a chance of being successful, it relies on us being able to work together. So cooperation in all levels is key. We saw that when Brazil was in the presence of the G20, information integrity played, it has a protagonism, and it came out as something important out of the G20 debates. I truly hope to see this in South Africa with this M20 effort. I truly hope to see that information integrity becomes also part of the central agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Carla, I'm just reminded of, if we're looking at what's happening geopolitically, with globalization, coming through, and there was that, migration and social integration as well. Not enough was focused on who was excluded in that front. And so we see the ripple effects obviously gave rise to populist tendencies, fascism, and right-wing movements. And so to your point about acknowledging the playing field is obviously increasing, but also the stakeholders that have now entered, your influences, etc., and the power that they have, and how we're going to navigate this. And so with that said, Melissa, I want to now bring you to the conversation, because just the other day, we obviously had World Press Freedom Commemorations Day, and we were looking at domestic legislation, we were looking at freedom of expression, how it also links to international obligations at large. I wonder if we could speak to that in relation to obviously G20, the themes itself of solidarity, equality, and sustainability at large. Yeah.
Thank you, Lizzo, and good morning, everyone. It's nice to be here. William was right. Gardens are a very important question, and I would like to tackle it in this manner, particularly that you mentioned equality as being one of the themes of G20, of the G20. Yeah. This is also one of the things that is being promoted under the M20 initiative, because it is an important issue, particularly when we're looking at information integrity. I mean, under equality, we all know that access to data is very problematic, and people did touch on access to data briefly. But we also see that there are issues that hinder or impact this access to data. I mean, outside of infrastructure problems in some contexts, in some countries, you have the cost of communication, the cost of data. So already you have a large population that is not able to access information, and so you cannot talk about equality in terms of access to information if you're not looking at addressing issues that hinder this access, and infrastructure is one of them. But also language, lack of media literacy skills, information literacy skills, digital literacy skills. These are also issues that hinder this accessibility to credible information. Of course, there are different other issues that impact this, but for me, we cannot talk about equality in terms of access to credible information, or just equality in the media and information integrity sector without addressing a core, one of the important aspects, which is quality and access to data. And so maybe to come and respond to your question about legislation. And I hope I don't get in trouble for this, but I am privileged to speak. But as somebody who lives in South Africa, but also as a Zambian. We are seeing, unfortunately, some countries that are passing laws that are restricting access to information, or laws that are even hindering or not doing anything to improve the information ecosystem. In the case of Zambia, the country recently passed 2 pieces of legislation, and talks, from the media sector, especially, one of the fears is that this hinders, or this borders on censorship and surveillance. And so when you talk about censorship and surveillance in relation to media, you are talking about something that is, pretty broad.
Acronym for economic communities of West African states.
There is need for, enabling environment to ensure that we have equality, but there's also the need for people-purpose laws, especially laws that that support the work of the media, but also ensure that there's equality in terms of access to information.
Yeah, absolutely, and absolutely, and it's to your point about balancing freedom of expression versus the responsibilities that also come with that. And I want to pick up further on what Mrs. echoed by bringing it into the conversation, because sustainability is also key. We obviously having bold leaders converging on our shores, and yeah, with that comes resources. But obviously, we've seen the impact that big tech has had on the engagement and its output as well. And I wonder if you could weigh in further on what you're observing on that front. How are you able to also poke that way a little bit, and then what's that call to action, given the landscape that we're experiencing right now?
Thank you very much, Lisa, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. As someone who runs their own media outlet, I wish South Africa would have taken this opportunity to bring us in, so that we can talk about the challenges that we are facing as people that have or are small players in the media space. We've got big companies in there. The budget for advertising has shrunk to the point that nothing can be shared. So having world leaders coming to our country, for me, it's really important that we become part of the discussion, but the discussion is that should be centered around investment. We talk about what we do. We talk about the importance of delivering critical information and how we deliver it, and how can everything work, given that now we've got your TikTok, Twitter, and so on and so on. And someone has related that young people get, I think it was who said that young people get information from wow. And at the end of the day, we still need it. We still needed to give informative articles that even if you do a video, it's a video that when someone watches it would understand what is happening and what is really happening. So with the G20 for me, I wish we could get involved at a level. I'm disappointed that we're not there. We could get involved at a level whereby we discuss investment. Well, these leaders will be here. They need to understand where is South Africa and where we are going with regard to building our media houses. We've got NDDA, it gives money, but it doesn't support everyone. We are members of AIP, Association of Independent Publishers. I think out of the majority of us, we live on sponsored content in order for us to sustain our media houses. So in terms of sustainability, we are struggling, and G20 I think would have been a good platform for government to have that we were media owners can invest and talk about sustainability and how we can go and see if there can be any other person who can be interested in investing in what we do.
Okay, thank you for that, because I want to bring this back into the conversation now. When you've spoken to the issues of resources and the need on that front, but that obviously directly impacts the quality of journalism as well. That trend that we've seen. So in restoring public trust, you have to also look at capacity building and the state of newsrooms at large and what we're working with at this point. What is that reality on the ground? What more could be done as we reimagine or rethink what is possible now going forward?
So the issue of my point is dealing with the issue of media sustainability. And actually, the good thing is that she's a small independent publisher. So maybe that's not a good thing because they feel the pressure even more in terms of the threats and also the vulnerability in terms of their sustainability. Because if for 1 month a advertiser does not advertise with grant funding, then that outlet is at a risk. I think this underlines the importance of this M20, right? In saying that, yes, it's an independent initiative, but it's important to bring it into focus and also to the agenda of the G20 leaders. Because outlets like Moiponi's actually are very key and crucial to the free flow information in this country, because most media outlets, obviously, that are sitting in urban centers of Johannesburg, Durban, and Cape Town, they tend to be concentrated there because of the financial pressures, which means now that those far-flung bureaus, those bureaus that were there in some of these small towns, are no longer there. So there is a need to assist for partners to come together around the issue of media sustainability. And that's also why we feel that the issue of information integrity has to come back to the agenda of the G20, because as I'm saying that, with the rise in low quality AI content, because now we know that companies or those with malicious plans are able to disseminate fake information that is then reproduced and integrated into AI learning models. So, and we're sitting here with people who rely on Grok and ChatGPT, right? So it's important for also tech companies to also understand that they can't just be bystanders and say, we will not be involved in these efforts. So all of these things highlight the vagaries of journalism, but at the same time, the importance of all players, including policymakers and governments, to understand that credible, quality, public interest journalism is important for the sustenance of democracy and as an antidote to disinformation and also destabilization of countries. We had violence in Kenya after the elections. We've got elections coming up in South Africa. MMA does a good job in trying to counter some of that disinformation, but it's just too much, you know? So the need to support journalism is a crucial one and quite a vital one for governments, not just in South Africa, but in Africa and globally. And actually, because this presidency, the South African presidency of the G20 also includes the African Union, which is invited, that's why for us, it's important to make sure that we highlight these issues and we're foregrounding issues of information integrity and making sure that we can try and get as much influence, to influence as much as possible some of those discussions, and also how those governments, respective governments, go about in terms of responding to the issue of media sustainability in their country. So the issue paper that was referenced earlier will come out later this week. In fact, there is already a website, which is m20.org, where it will be published, but where we'll also be publishing other papers that will come from other partners, including on issues like climate change. Because this is not just about media integrity. There is a lot that is at stake as we try to tackle issues of global inequality, issues of the growing public debt, which is an important topic for G20. All of that information, how we move forward without a strong, in fact, the UN published the 5 principles of information integrity. And one of those talks about a strong, independent, this illustrates media, and says that you cannot have information integrity without. So that tells you how important a role it is. So we're hoping that with all of these efforts, we'll be able, we don't know what's going to happen in 26 with the American presidency, but we're hoping that this is a global movement. Solutions obviously are local, but we're hoping that we'll be able to influence colleagues elsewhere, that we can be able to respond in one voice. And that is why I'm happy to see Paul here and making sure that these are conversations that are continuing. In fact, I must say, that actually some of these conversations did come up quite strongly at the inaugural conference that we had at GIBS that Michael hosted. And it is good to see that there is this movement in the media globally where we finding a common voice in terms of how to respond to big tech, because these companies are big and they own these platforms. We are at the whims, at the mercy of algorithms. When actually even the UN does make the point that the issue of transparency and giving control to internet users to know how their data is being used and also how it is being shared, but also to be able to access information that is crucial to them making decisions about their lives. So there are a number of initiatives that are parallel to this M20, which have to do with media sustainability, where we suggest and where we went to it, but as particularly as the South African National Editors Forum, where we are proposing a number of responses to assist journalism, to save journalism in this country. We know that there are bargaining codes that some colleagues in other jurisdictions have entered into with big tech companies. Polar references Competition Commission report, which says that we need to set up, which says that Google in particular is to contribute about 350 million, right, to a country fund. And Google has already said we will not do that, right? So there's a lot, there's still a need for that collaboration, but more importantly for me, these issues that we highlight in this issue paper that my board and our colleagues are raising, that take us back to why we need to do as much as possible. Where we have partners, they can actually try and influence their ministers that are sitting in some other things. And that we as the South Africans can also be able to influence our own government, making sure that these issues find center stage at the G20. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Guru. Everything is, so nuanced but interlinked at the same time. And so, Paula, perhaps you can also just, on the fact that citizens reflected by school, talk to us about results, scenarios, the best practices. If we're obviously looking at the quality of journalism, capacity building, the role of the media, who is the media at this point? How do we reimagine this going forward? Also to the point of this, with the local domestic issues and regulations, how would they benchmarks against international best practice as well?
So I think I'd like to catch on something that you mentioned, which is investment, and also my fellow panelists mentioned that as well. I think that what we're seeing in Brazil is a combined approach that's needed. When we talk about investment, we could think first about innovation. I think that our industry, the media, has lost its appetite and capacity of innovating. And of course, it has to do with the fact that we are under a lot of big financial pressure. And when you're under a lot of financial pressure, this is the worst moment for you to innovate. Innovation demands risk-taking, and you cannot take any risks if you have no funds. So, but it's not only that. I think it has to do also with something that I believe we share, our two countries, not only our two countries, but how our relationship with the tech platforms has been established. With a lot of the innovation when it comes to the media space came from the land. It was the tech platforms who gave us, as in theory, presence. We accepted as presence a lot of the innovation that help us navigate the digital marketing and digital economy. But what we found out is that they're not presence. They have an extremely high cost, which is that today we have a profound relationship of dependence relationship when it comes to media platforms. They control how we reach our audiences. They control, so we depend on them. And this is a relationship that is marked by a profound asymmetry of power. So it's not a relationship you want to be in. So we need to figure out a vision for our industry, a vision that encompasses technology, that encompasses innovation, but we cannot do this if there is no investment. On that regard, there's another front, which is the licensing agreements. So what we are seeing now is that because of AI, some outlets, and usually the big ones, are signing licensing agreements with AI companies. The question we need to make ourselves in the market is like, who is going to be able to sign these agreements? And what that is going to mean in a larger scale. Because we cannot celebrate that 1 media outlets, 2 media outlets, or 3 media outlets have signed agreements. When we have a whole industry that has been left behind. What does that mean? It means that people, like we're going to have, is a game for winners and a few winners. In a country like Brazil, where the market is already extremely concentrated, what we're going to see is a media market that is even more concentrated, with medium and small outlets that are going to disappear. And we know what a concentrated media market has as an effect to the public debate and to democracy. So we need to think about what are the impacts of these licensing agreements and look into solutions such as the ones in Denmark, where the media ecosystem has come together and decided whether there is a collective agreement that is going to be made among all the media players, big ones, legacy ones. Sorry, the jet lag is hitting. Yes, sorry, I know. So whether we're going to do this all together, or we're going to have a few winners, and we need to have this we need to do it together. And I would say that in the case of South Africa, because you were an English-speaking country, this is going to be even more challenging because these companies, they're interested in content. And they're going to already have English-speaking content coming from other international players. So how is the South African reality is going to be represented in these models? So what kind of information is going to be collected by these models? It's something for you to think about. But finally, I want to touch on another level, which is equally important, if not most. We cannot do all this together, and public policies are essential. So we need to have a public policy vision for our industry, as many other industries have. Not only platforms need to be regulated, but we need to have like how we're going to make like different media outlets, particularly the medium and small ones, have access to public advertising funding. This is a debate that we're having now in Brazil. How we're going to have infrastructure policies in place. Algorithm transparency is key. We need to understand how algorithms work and impact our business. And this is something that demands a level of investment that we only if the state is involved will be able to achieve. We need to start to talk about public infrastructure again. We won't be able to succeed if we cannot access public infrastructure when it comes to technology. And public infrastructure is not something that you wake up one day and say, oh, we need public infrastructure. It's something that demands years of investment. It demands planning. So we need urgently to talk about all this. And this is why I want to emphasize again that as for like the G20, when we're talking about economic development, socio-economic development, it's so important that we're able to have a debate around maybe sustainability within the discussions. This is not a separate issue. That's an issue that has to do with the social and economic welfare of our society. So we must have discussion within this forum. That's why I hope that the M20 effort that is being put out of South African civil society and media organizations is able to have a formal connection with the G20.
Thank you. Thank you, Paula. Let me piggyback on what Paula just echoed, because she's speaking about the issue of agency. And Wulefe said the story of the world is incomplete without Africa's version. So we obviously need to be part of driving that those inputs as well. An enabling environment supported by government is crucial. Algorithm transparency as well to avoid bias. Also, just the issue of jurisdiction, and that was also something that came through the issue of especially when it comes to accountability, right? So where these big techs are based and how we hold them accountable when their headquarters are not even in the country of operation. So there's more questions than answers at this point. I think every question has been a thesis loading. But I wonder if you'd like to weigh in on the issue of agency and really what is coming through on that front.
Agency is agency. No, but it's very important that we treat issues of information integrity as agent as possible. The formation of the M20 was supposed to happen sometime back, but thankfully there's an opportunity now. Meaning there's an opportunity for issues that are facing the media to attract the attention at global level, such as the one with the G20. So it's very urgent that we address some of the issues that have been mentioned, particularly issues to do with media sustainability. And we have to look at this beyond just funding models. There's so many issues that impact media sustainability. We haven't even talked about mental health of journalists. We haven't even, which contributes to sustainability. We haven't even, talked about the gender disinformation and attacks against female journalists. We haven't. There's so many issues that we haven't talked about that point to media sustainability. Therefore, these are real, lived experiences of journalists who are practicing, journalists who are being attacked simply for doing their job. Therefore, it becomes very important that we treat these issues, with the utmost agency needed. Lisa, if you could just allow me to just speak also on one of the themes of the G20, which is solidarity, and already mentioned some of these things. It's very important that we come together as media or people in the global south to discuss these issues now and contribute with our lived experiences and perspective, because if we're looking at reshaping policy frameworks around media and information integrity, we need to speak up as people in Africa, people in the global south, and there's so many lessons to be learned from Brazil. Clearly, there's so many lessons to be learned from Brazil, but there's so many lessons to be learned from other parts of Africa. And I think what we need is solidarity to come together and contribute to solutions with from an African perspective. And the M20 presents an opportunity, this opportunity. But there's outside of that, there's also you might be aware that the African Commission on Human and People's Rights passed resolution 630, mandate 630, which focuses or mandates the special rapporteur to be provided for states to monitor tech platforms in relation to information integrity. There's a huge opportunity there for our African voices to be heard and contributed to that process. So just a little bit on that. Consultation is ongoing for that meeting in Africa, and Sanef and a few other organizations are leading that process, where we are looking at getting participation from stakeholders in the media sector, but also civil society, government, and tech platforms. So there's a great opportunity for us to contribute our African perspectives to policy frameworks, and the resolution 630, as well as the M20 provides great opportunities for us to have. Yes.
Possibilities and probabilities. That's what we're looking into, and we're making sense of obviously what we're dealing with at this point. And when as a small media player, also part of Sanef, I want you to perhaps explore your relationship to big tech companies. What's their reality on the ground for you, given your operations? But if we also look at what we can right, let's also explore that. What's working at this point?
I think the most important thing I would agree with analysts, we need to work we've got Google, we've got Meta. We need to understand, because most of the money goes to them. So we need to see what is it that they are doing, that they are doing. And also we need to move in the way that we see if what they are doing is right, how to be competitive or how we work with them. Because at the end of the day, there are big players that we cannot find as a small player. We need to learn from input, even here at home, there are big players that are making and making a lot of money. What we need to do as small players is say, how do we work with them? How do we compete their market? And everything is about having resources. We don't have resources as small players. Where can we get money so that we can resources in order for us to produce what we are producing? So the issue of tech and also the issues of AR, unfortunately, is the new world. We have to find a way of how we compete and work with them. In my region, I can use AI for instance. I still want people to write the story own way we used to. And I'm glad that it's the way that research and see that everything is with AI. Most people now, especially these young people that call themselves they use this new technology to take their way out. And it's a new way of doing stories, or it's a new way of making. And it's a new way whereby if you use the technology, you produce and program and deliver quicker than when you're still using the old way of writing stories. But everything is about coming to party, seeing how we can work with these new ways of doing things. In IP, I feel like sometimes we're not as organized all together the same way Sanef does things. So in all these things, even when we talk about sustainability and getting money, getting investors, we need to come together as a team and say, as small players, how do we make money? How do we take advantage of what people is doing, what the tech is doing, and everywhere?
Okay, so you're the view that everything is to be complementary instead of fighting. That's a nice way of looking at it as well, as opposed to fighting what it is. Thank you for those sentiments. I think on that note now, I'm just going to open up to the floor, and perhaps we can lay the groundwork on some of the important, discussions and themes that you want to begin in. I'm going to ask you to please stand and introduce yourself, who you represent, and then you're welcome to pose a question. If you remember, you'd like to also
Let's just stand.
You can stand as well. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, my name is Chris. I'm representing myself.
Okay.
So my question is to Paula. I would have posed it to His Excellency Ambassador Philo, but he's a representative of the Brazilian government, and this has to do with the judiciary. So it relates to activist Supreme Court Judge Alexandre de Moraes. What lessons have you derived from his work as an activist judge, especially in him taking on X, the platform, the fining of X, for those bots, the Twitter accounts that were spreading or allegedly spreading disinformation. You spoke of public policy, and CSOs coming together. So when you have an activist judge like that, what is the precedence? What are the policies that have been set by having such a judge? Is it really, has been a positive experience for yourselves to have a person like that? What are the lessons for South Africa and for Africa?
Let's take another question from Manebo, and then we'll allow him to respond, and then we'll continue. Thank you.
Thank you so much for bringing it on. Okay. Thank you. My name is Manebo Parker. I am a subcommittee member of Sanef Information. So the way I understand it, on the one hand, got issues with the tech companies, especially the algorithm bias, which obviously will push engagement and expense of credible news or information integrity. And then on the other hand, let's have to pick up on the point that was raised by Ambassador Benedicto Fonseca about I mentioned it, if I didn't, please forgive me. But you mentioned something very, very important, that you've got 50% of the masses out there that don't care about engaging with news. And you can count in there your influencers and so forth, which is on the other side of the tech companies. So you've got the tech companies, then you've got information integrity in the middle.
Yeah.
So, but then you just fell short of saying what is it that can be done, to make sure that the masses out there and bring those processes into the fold to defend information. So that's my question.
Okay. Or if you, anyone in particular that you want to
I think
direct that to?
can touch because you mentioned Meta
Okay.
or Facebook, and that the G with the news with the expert of engagement or what they can touch on that. But also, I think Honda also based on the Brazilian experience of the mass that can be brought to the fold. That don't care about information because they have their own process.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Malebo. Paula, would you like to have this? Okay.
Thank you for the question. About our Supreme Court judge. I personally, I wouldn't call him an activist. I think he's a judge who's using the law, in some cases stretching it, but using it in accordance with the legislation that is there. But I think that to understand his actions now, we need to take into account historical context and how misinformation has played an important role in our political environment. So misinformation and via distribution via social media networks and platforms has been used to question our democratic institutions repeatedly. So Brazil has a very safe and acknowledged and respected electronic system. And misinformation has been used to question that systematically prior to our election. This is only one example. I could give you several. And there is no coincidence that we almost went through a political military coup in Brazil with the use of the information, with people actually attacking our physically, and not only during the in tech platforms, social media members, but physically attacking our democratic institutions. So I think what we've seen in Brazil is the escalation of the use of social media platforms to promote disinformation with political purposes. Also, what we saw also in Brazil is the use of any attempt of regulation building to a narrative that regulation equals censorship. And this narrative has been used by a specific political field. So I'm giving you this historical context so you can understand that when it came to the closing of X, it wasn't something that happened one day. It was something that was built with a consistent attack to our democratic institutions. And it was done using our national legislation. And it was done, and it's something that we need to discuss because every time regulation is being debated, the answer from the platform is like, oh, we won't be able to operate in your country. And they express this as a threat, like, oh, your legislation won't allow us to operate in your country. What we saw in Brazil is that when we apply legislation saying you cannot operate if you don't follow our national legislation, is that they reopen. They assign a lawyer in Brazil. X is now working again. He paid the fine. They paid the fine. So we need to use our national legislation to make sure that international social media platforms work in our countries in accordance with our national interests and in accordance to democratic values. So I think that, yes, he became famous because I think that when you think globally, we haven't seen a lot of countries facing the platform like that. But everything that was done was part of a bigger historical context, and it was done using our national legislations. But yes, I want to acknowledge that we are coming to a very delicate territory because the same legislation could be used in a non-democratic way, and you're absolutely right to point that. But I also feel that this is a kind of challenge that we're going to face when we have our democracies under attack globally. And that's why also I think that the collaboration with civil society organizations, which was something that happened in Brazil also when our democracy was at stake, was so important. Because we can push for accountability when it comes to democracy. So I think that we're going to face more and more this kind of challenges, but one thing that we cannot do is allow the idea of freedom of expression, press freedom, to be sequestered by non-democratic interests. We need to claim them for ourselves.
I think, let me pick up on the last point that I made around the issue of political laws and regulation. I think also the ambassador touched on that. I mean, our approach in the South African context is actually to try and avoid that because we are very much aware of the dangers of that power falling in the wrong hands, as we've seen in what is regarded as the biggest influence in the world. So the issue that Malebo raises around the trust deficit in the media, I think the response to that, again, is in the issues that we are highlighting, particularly the promotion of public interest journalism. So transparency around use of data, around algorithms is actually important to the sustenance of the media, because if they can prioritize news, they can also promote news content. So the point here is that tech companies cannot have to come to the party. And that is why we need as much pressure as possible. And I know that in the Brazilian context and the edge of most governments is to say, let's go and regulate, but we worry about such laws being used against credible news sources. So I think there is a greater need for civil society, tech companies, governments, and also other policymakers and the media to kind of find a way to help sustain democracies around the world. Because you know that the issue of that very trust deficit is not just an organic thing of society just feeling that they don't trust the media. There's a deliberate attacks on the media. There's a president, whenever he speaks, he references the fake news and mainstream media. That's deliberate, intended to erode trust in journalism. So what we have argued as Sanef and other players around the world, there have been a number of suggestions, including the issue of one, promoting public interest journalism, that tech companies do that, but also I know there's some countries where they have must carry obligations, where there is public interest content that has to be carried by these platforms and also news media. The other thing is the issue of I think the issue of copyright law was raised here, because we know that those language learning models are using content. So there has to be some kind of a compensation for that, for media companies and publishers. So all of these things that I'm saying are not the silver bullet that will save journalism, but there are a number of interventions as we innovate, as we change, as we adapt to society. There are a number of things we can do to ensure that journalism survives. And people make the mistake when we talk about media sustainability, they think that it's about saving media companies. No, it is about saving journalism. So what journalism of this era becomes and what it morphs into is part of an unfolding and evolving process. But we need to do enough to ring fence and to make sure that journalism in this may be where there's a lot of information and low quality information that comes from various sources, that we're at least able to have quality public interest content being foregrounded. Before I hand back to you, I said earlier, I spoke about the website. I said m20sectionmedia20.org. That's where we, we'll be sharing some of that content. Thank you. Yes, it is live. Thank you.
Can I just make a quick comment on trust? Because I think that I'm all for re-questioning the platforms and holding them to account when it comes to content moderation. I also think that us as a media ecosystem, we need to also look into ourselves and think about what we are doing to promote this life of trust. I think Brazil is a country, for instance, where you have a majority of women and people that self-declare Black. And however, the majority of media companies are owned and directed by white men. So there is an issue of representation that's clear. People see themselves represented in the media. I think that when media companies mix branded content with editorial content without clear awareness, mixing corporate interests with public interest journalists, they are contributing to erode distrust. And I think that when we describe a police killing, in the case of Brazil, as a tactic operation, we're contributing to erode the trust that people have in our media organizations. So there are things that we need to reflect on the way we're doing our reporting, in the way we're establishing our business models, in the way we're representing the population that we should be serving.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. It's about the restoration of those power imbalances, particularly for the global South nations in relation to big tech companies and competency as well. Thank you for those reflections, Paula. I can see there's another hand at the back, so I'm just gonna pass this. Okay, thank you. You can project.
Loud enough.
Okay. Thank
My
you.
name is those journalism lecturer at the University with a very sort of long media background as well. I found the whole discussion this whole morning extremely interesting. One thing that I want to just quickly, I just want to, it's probably not going to be an answer, but I want to see what the panel thinks about that. It's come up from the ambassador's side and also from the speaker's side, that hangs together or goes together with trust. But the whole idea of the public or people who do not want, they do not have the appetite, I think were his words, they do not have the appetite for quality, believable news. They don't have that. Now, when online came in, the media was sort of jumping and the audience engagement became a huge big thing, and we had to sort of dance to their tune, and so it was this thing, and it's also a question of survival that is part of it. Now, how do you get back to a point where, and it's not about, I don't really think, I fought for I don't know how many years that journalists, or that the media is not to be trusted. But this whole thing, it's very easy to say that the media is not to be trusted. But if people do not have appetite for the information that they should have, and where has that news that they want to know, that they are interested in, or that what they should know about public interest, how do we handle that? And how would one look at their audiences and not be led by the nose? And by their wants and likes and dislikes and all of that. Because I think that's one very difficult thing that the media will have to, or that we all have to do, is how do we swing that mindset back to, I do need information. I do need the public interest stuff. Because if I don't read the media and I don't go to them, where am I going to get that? Yeah. So I'd really like to know what you think about this.
I just want to see if there's another hand before. Okay, Bonga, I think Bonga's also going to pass the microphone to me.
Hello, everyone. My name is Wonga. I'm the press attaché here at French Embassy, but a recovering journalist also.
Yes.
I was not with it because I had duty called, but I wanted also to understand the panel. Anyone can take this free. Guardrails are important media in South Africa, I think, is one of the celebrated free media that we have. A lot of people always applaud us for that, but if you look at what's happening now in America, the new administration, suddenly, if you criticize the president, you're a threat. So in South Africa, I don't think we'll ever come to that, but you never know. So there were 3 years ago, when we had a different president, there were people in his party calling for, it must be insults to, so it must be a crime to insult him, or they were looking for a monetary medium to self-regulate, not to longer self-regulate, but regulate South African media. So I'm interested in, if it's no longer the legal system we have, then how are those guardrails going to do in the next coming years if regimes change and dissemination is paramount and less access to vital information? I guess attention to that information in terms of, other than the legal route, what else is there to ensure that those guardrails don't shift no matter who comes and becomes president in South Africa, let's say?
Okay, so integrity or coherence online and offline, given those necessary guardrails, and then also just cautioning from becoming a pancake generation, which is an example I like to use, where there's so much information available, but it's spread thin. And so critical skills, analytical skills, wisdom, empathy, all that counts as well. That's probably how you discern the three. Who wants to take that? Okay, Lester, you go. Go ahead.
I can firstly contribute to the discussion around 50% that are not interested at all in issues of information integrity. They don't want to, especially now in the age of likes, fast news, and the preference by a certain population, preference to getting news from social media. I think I did talk about it before. Literacy is a very important thing, and I think it will play a key role in ensuring that we reach out to those 50%. So media literacy, digital literacy, information literacy, but also civic education, because we've talked about trust in the media, and I think this is also another one, another way that we can get the 50%. Because if you feel you cannot trust the media, or if you feel you cannot trust the electoral body in your country, how then are you going to even care about participating in or caring enough about information integrity? So I think we need, as we're having these conversations, we need to also highlight the need to build trust in democratic institutions, including the media. We need to be looking at scaling literacy campaigns. And I'm happy to announce that from here, I'll be going to a digital literacy workshop in Cape Town. So it's children. If that could happen everywhere in Africa, in digital literacy skills, if that could happen everywhere at large scale, imagine the impact that it can have the issue that we're talking about. So literacy is important, building trust is important, but also I think we need to recognize that access to public interest journalism should be recognized as a right. Much like how you look at access to clean water or access to health, we need to start looking at access to credible access to public. Let me just say credible journalism as a right. If we start treating it as such, then it will be one of the ways that we can capture the 50%. But also we need to take advantage of opportunities that the M20 presents, but also consultative processes that are happening around these issues. We need to take advantage of this, because this is one surest way of making sure that issues that the media face or issues around information integrity and access recognized and addressed at global level at this G20 level. I think that's one of the surest ways that we can handle this.
Thank you. Bonga, the question about the guidelines of democracy. The reality there is that we went through that era, I won't call it the 9 years. And it was in this country, actually, after the 2007 it's a conference where the issue of the media was tried. So again, the reason why we don't have it today, and I'll link it to what Paula was saying, is because we pushed back as the media and civil society. And beyond that, we did reflect in terms of the flaws within our own systems of self-regulation and co-regulation. And now, if you look at the constitution of the how the press council is constituted, including appeals, I can actually see the value in having a self-regulation and co-regulation. So that's why we're saying that a strong, independent media is an antidote to such. That's why it is important to continue to raise our voices and to be able to highlight such abuses of power and also self-respect. And we're not without blame, 100%. And I think everyone understands that. Which links me to the next point about quality believable news that was raising, which is best reflected by the trust deficit in the media. I think the reality is that people can access information anyhow. We're not trying to shove public interest journalism down their throats. But we do know that, and we do argue that public interest journalism is actually a public good. Everyone should have a right to quality, factual, reliable, and credible journalistic content, especially at this time where you have various sources of information, and also knowing what we know now, because as media companies, as you rightfully say, what we did was that we had to digitally transform and chase the clicks. And then we realized, hang on, if you're going to measure success on engagement, actually, that's a downward spiral, because now you want the shock effect so that you can get the clicks and so that you can derive advertising content. That's a flawed system. We all agree that it is flawed. So that's why I think, yes, you may have influencers, please, they must continue to do what they're doing. But what is important here is to understand the role of public interest journalism. That is not just a matter of commercial competition. It's actually about democracy, promoting democracy and making sure that when you look around, in fact, I'll make a good example. During COVID in this country, the engagement and also audiences of, for in particular, SABC skyrocketed, right? And also news sites. I think at some point, News 24 was sitting at 6 million, and they probably went beyond 10, right? At that particular point, which tells you that, yes, there's entertainment value, there's Kardashians, and there's all of that other content, which is not public interest journalism. But when it comes to the crunch, we saw with COVID, where those strong public institutions were actually, they gained an audience, and people fell back to say, okay, I can hear everything that's being said, but what does they say this to say? What does News 24 say? What does Timeline say? Right? So that tells you that not all is lost. That tells you that in the same way that platforms can deprioritize news, they can actually do a lot of good by promoting credible news content and making sure that it is freely and readily available. I mean, my mother now believes that Lady Gaga's daughter lives in Cape Town, right? And I have people who drink the cabinet of soda because they saw that some, but and that's the reality that we live in. I mean, you sit in family WhatsApp groups and you have people who regard as sensible and discerning, actually the kind of nonsense that they believe. So the best way to counter all of that is actually, and it's not a, as I said, it's not a simple fact, is to promote critical news content, not just as a matter for commercial competition, as I said, but as a public good. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. I'm reminded of a bird that takes off. It's got two wings. Perhaps on the one end it's scientific, but on the other end, if you've got opinions and esoteric divergence, the bird takes off and flies because it's balanced. So thank you for speaking to that. Well, now I hope your question was answered as well, you, Dr. Tandita. Any other questions at this point? Sure, no problem. Okay.
Thank you. I don't want to take any debate, but just to clarify something I have said before. Maybe I should rephrase in a way, because what I meant about the 50% does not mean that 50% of people who vote were relying on fake news or disinformation, because many of those people, there's a very big clash in Brazil between right and left, and the economic alternatives, the economic vision, and but in the context of the election, especially after the election, there were fake news, disinformation, distorted information. So it's very difficult to say that this 50% were despite those fake news, but that was something that permeated the environment, and that even became worse after the election. So just to clarify that the 50% is not exactly linked to disinformation, but to an environment that was
okay, we'll take that. Obviously, all data interpretation. So obviously, and there's outliers. So, but thank you for correcting that on record. I just want to see if there's any other questions at this point. Yeah. Okay. So actually, on that note, let's get some closing remarks from each panelist, and then yeah, we'll end the discussion. Oh, okay. It's so tiring. This is representation and civism. Bonnie, go ahead.
In closing, I really believe that governments and world leaders please promote in media for several reasons. This would be we're talking about democratic integrity, we're talking about combating misinformation, we're talking about cultural preservation and economic growth. And like I said, investing in media aligns with sustainability goals, and also promoting informed society as well as social cohesion. Thank you.
Okay.
So I want to find two quick things. I think that when it comes, I think information, the production of credible and quality journalism is essential. We are about to see a major change in consumption patterns. We're about to see like a structural change when it comes to how people are going to access and consume news. And we need to understand how this is going to happen. We have no information, we don't have enough information about how AI is going to impact the consumption of news. And we need to learn that very fast. We cannot allow the platforms to do that. We need to have that information cycle. So research is very much needed in that regard. I'd like to end by thanking you very much for the invitation, for being here. I think that this is a kind of dialogue that is extremely important. There are extremely concrete opportunities for cooperation. Cooperation is not only an idea, we're actually putting this into action. So meetings like this are super important. I think that the crisis that we're witnessing globally, I also think is a huge opportunity for new alliances, and we should take these opportunities. I'm a realistic, optimistic, and I like to think that together we will find a way that could continue to promote independent, plural, and strong media ecosystem worldwide. So thank you very much.
closing. So maybe just to reiterate that the M20, there's a need for the M20 to be recognized as an official media engagement group, like, G20. And I think that's for a reason we're gathered here. But just to emphasize that it's very critical that this happens, because the sector is facing so many challenges that have been, already spoken about. But there's also opportunities for the media sector in having the M20. And so it becomes important that people participate in all processes in events around these issues. Media Monitoring Africa has a number of events that are coming up around the M20 and information integrity. And they're themed from gender to youth to community, not really themed, but focused around those. So everybody is welcome to participate. But also just to say that we shouldn't be speaking alone in our offices or countries or sectors. This fight needs concerted effort from different stakeholders, not just in the media sector. And it's great to see people from embassies. It's great to see people from the media and even civil society in this room. But we do need that concerted effort, and not just in South Africa, but in Africa and also in Brazil. There's so many lessons to learn there and solutions that can be created. So thank you so much for this opportunity.
Say this, I should have spoken first.
We save the
The points have been made. I think just lastly, as the industry, obviously, we're facing a number of challenges. And whenever we think we're catching up, we realize that the target has shifted. So as part of this evolving media environment, it's important for us, as Paula has said, we try and stay ahead of the game. So, and in a digital world, the issue of transparency is actually very important. That's why it's important for big tech companies to come to the forward and actually assist us as people in terms of using that information. One, to, yes, better our audiences, but also to better serve the public. So the issue of transparency and also, yes, will evolve and change with the times. That research is very important in that regard. But lastly, I think the importance that Paula underlines of this engagement, discussions we had in Brazil, that we're going to have in Marrakesh, and in other parts of the pool, right, later on. It's important to have international solidarity, because what big tech has sought to do is divide and rule. But now it's important to make sure that we can leverage some of this global cooperation and come together as we have here in Pretoria, and having done so in Sao Paulo and intending to do so in other platforms. So I think it's just to encourage that kind of cooperation. And once again, to thank you, the French ambassador and the embassy for hosting us, and thank you all the partners who are here today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for just perhaps to wrap up. It's clear that history is back with a vengeance. You've alluded to divide and conquer and the rise of populism, but also an optimistic heart. The history. The art of history is always bent towards justice, and so that is what we're going to focus on. And it's clear that whilst this is ever evolving, it's disruptive, it's nuanced, contradictory. There's more questions and answers at this point. So there's lots of work that needs to be done, but it needs to be done, and it needs to be done well, and it needs to be done well with all of us in mind. And so thank you to all of you for being here. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to the Embassy of France for hosting us. And on that note, we're going to leave it there. Just outside, there is some food lunch that's available. You're welcome to keep the conversation going and mingle further. But until next time, take care. Goodbye.